Has it ever happened to you that you walk into a room and suddenly forget why you went there? Or you have a word on the tip of your tongue and it simply won't come out? That feeling can be incredibly frustrating. Many people believe it's the inevitable beginning of memory loss that comes with age. But today I want to tell you something important. In many cases, that isn't true. And there is a simple way to start waking up your memory with an exercise that takes barely 1 minute a day. I am Dr. Gabriel Mena, a neurologist, and over the years I have learned to recognize many kinds of silence. Some silences are peaceful, but others are heavy, unsettling, as if they were shouting from inside the mind. The silence of a word that refuses to come out when you need it. The silence of standing in a doorway without remembering why you walked into the room. Or the silence in the eyes of someone you love when you try to tell a story and suddenly lose your train of thought. I have seen those silences hundreds of times in the eyes of my patients. Over time you learn to read them, to understand the frustration hidden behind them. And I especially remember a patient who came to my office carrying that constant sense of emptiness in her memory. Her name was Elena. When Elena came to see me, her life was filled with small forgetful moments that were making her feel increasingly insecure. She told me the hardest moments happened when she looked at old photographs. One day she picked up a picture from her wedding. In the image she was smiling, surrounded by her family. But as she looked at it she felt something strange, like a cold hollow in her stomach. She could see her happy face in the photograph, but she could no longer hear in her mind the sound of her father's laughter during the toast. She remembered that he had told a joke. She knew everyone had laughed, but the sound, the emotion, the moment itself seemed to have faded away. The memory was there, but without life. Like a postcard without sound or feeling. In that moment, Elena felt something many of my patients have described with the same fear. The sensation that her history, her memories, even her identity were slowly fading. She believed it was inevitable. A sentence she simply had to accept with age. But that day I looked her in the eyes and told her something that completely changed the way she understood what was happening. Elena, your brain is not broken. Your brain is simply waiting for the right instructions to wake up. I showed her a very simple exercise, something that takes only 60 seconds a day. When I first explained it, it seemed too simple to her. She thought something so small could not possibly make any difference. But as the days went by, that tiny minute began to change something inside her mind. Little by little she started to feel that her memories were regaining color, sound, and detail. The mental clarity she thought she had lost began to return. And today I want to share that same exercise with you. Because no one deserves to live surrounded by those silences. Let me ask you something honestly. Has it ever happened that a word disappears just when you need it most? Or that the name of someone you know well suddenly vanishes for a moment? Or that you walk into a room and forget what you were about to do? If you have ever felt that small sting of frustration, if you have ever quietly wondered whether you might be losing your memory, I want you to remember two very important things. First, you are not alone. Millions of people experience this. Second, and perhaps even more important, in many cases, this is not something you have to accept as inevitable. There is a widespread belief that memory simply wears down with age and that nothing can be done about it. But that idea is one of the biggest traps when it comes to understanding how the brain truly works. Stay with me because in the next few minutes I will not only show you the 1-minute exercise that helped Elena and many other patients, but you will also understand something fascinating. Your brain has an incredible ability to adapt, strengthen, and even rejuvenate, no matter how old you are. When Elena came to my office, she explained that her problem had not appeared overnight. It wasn't sudden. It was more like a fog that slowly began to enter her life. At first, they seemed like small and unimportant things. One day she was at the supermarket looking for a spice for a recipe. She knew exactly which one she needed. She could picture the jar in her mind, but the words simply wouldn't come. She stood there in front of the shelf for several minutes trying to remember it. It was paprika. But her brain could not give her that word. She confessed that in that moment she felt deeply embarrassed, as if everyone around her could see that something in her mind was not working properly. In the end she had to take out her phone and type into the search bar, "red spice for stews." It was her phone that showed her the word her own memory could not find. Over time, these situations began to happen more often. Little by little, she started avoiding conversations with her friends because she felt she couldn't keep up with the flow of the discussion. She was afraid of going blank in the middle of a conversation. And that fear slowly began to close her world. A woman who once enjoyed gatherings, phone calls, and long conversations began isolating herself. Her social life gradually shrank until many days she spoke only with her immediate family. But there was one moment she remembers as one of the most painful. One afternoon, her 7-year-old grandson was showing her a drawing of the family. He pointed to one of the stick figures and asked innocently, "Grandma, do you remember what Uncle's name is?" He was referring to Elena's own brother. And for one terrible second, the name did not come. She told me that in that moment her eyes filled with tears. She didn't want to worry the child, so she simply told him she was a little tired. But that night she could not sleep. When she came to see me, her voice trembling, she asked a question I will never forget. "Doctor, who am I if I can't even remember my own brother's name?" Because losing memory is not just about forgetting where you left your keys. For many people it feels as if the roots that connect them to their own story are beginning to weaken. Before coming to see me, Elena had already visited other doctors. Most told her the same thing, that it was normal for her age, that she should try not to stress and perhaps do crossword puzzles. But she felt that no one was truly listening to what she was going through. Resignation was starting to settle into her life. She believed her destiny might be to become a silent spectator of her own story. And when a person loses hope, one of the brain's greatest enemies appears. I always tell my patients that hopelessness is a silent poison for the mind. That is why, before talking about the exercise that could help her, I needed her to understand something essential: what was really happening inside her brain. The mental fog Elena described does not appear by magic. In many cases, it is simply the visible signal of imbalances that have been accumulating in our lifestyle. One thing I often explain in my consultations is that many memory problems do not begin directly in the brain, but in our daily habits. One of the first things we reviewed was her diet. There is something many people have experienced without realizing it, that heavy mental feeling after eating foods rich in refined flour or sugar. That drowsiness, that slight confusion, what some people call food fog. In many cases, this is related to insulin resistance. When the body constantly receives spikes of glucose, cells begin responding less effectively to insulin, the hormone responsible for managing that energy. And this imbalance directly affects the brain, which is the organ that consumes the most energy in the body. A poorly fueled brain cannot function at its full potential. Another factor we reviewed was sleep. For years, society has glorified the idea of sleeping less as if it were a sign of productivity. In reality, it is one of the biggest mistakes when it comes to brain health. Sleep is not wasted time. It is when the brain performs its maintenance. During deep sleep phases, the brain clears metabolic waste and organizes important memories, transferring them into long-term storage. When that process is constantly interrupted, as happens with conditions like sleep apnea, the brain cannot complete its work. It is like waking a librarian every 5 minutes while they are trying to organize thousands of books. By the end of the day, the files remain in complete disorder. We also reviewed something many people overlook: medications. There are common drugs, including certain antihistamines and sleeping pills, that can cause confusion or memory lapses as side effects, especially in older adults. Some of these medications block neurotransmitters that are essential for learning and memory. Sometimes the cause of mental fog is literally inside the medicine cabinet at home. When Elena understood all this, she experienced something she had not felt in a long time: relief. Her problem was not a mysterious or inevitable degeneration. There were concrete causes, factors that could be corrected. It wasn't her brain failing without explanation. It was the conditions under which her brain was functioning. That understanding gave her something extremely valuable back: a sense of control. And when a person regains a sense of control over their health, they are far more prepared to take the next step: action. I remember clearly the day Elena first arrived at my office. A mutual friend had told her about me and said something she repeated when she sat down in front of me. They say you really listen. Still, she walked in with very little expectation. She thought she would hear the same answer she had heard so many times before. She told me her entire story. The supermarket incident. The moment with her grandson. The silent memory of her father's laughter. I did not interrupt her once. I let her release all the fear and frustration she had been carrying for months. When she finished speaking, her voice still full of emotion, I did not hand her a prescription. Instead, I leaned slightly toward her and told her firmly that her story could still change. Have you ever had a word slip away just when you needed it, or noticed that a familiar name takes too long to appear in your mind? Those kinds of moments can make you feel like your memory is slowly fading. But what I am about to show you can help stimulate your brain with something very simple, a 1-minute exercise that can begin reactivating your mind when practiced consistently. I clearly remember the moment I told Elena something that changed how she understood what was happening. I said, "Elena, many people believe memory simply wears out with age, as if it were a battery that slowly drains and nothing can be done about it. But the truth is, that is not entirely accurate." For the first time, someone was not confirming her resignation, but questioning it. And in that moment I introduced her to a concept that has become one of the most important pillars of my work as a neurologist, neuroplasticity. I asked her to imagine her brain in a different way. Not as a machine that breaks down over time, but as a garden. I told her something very simple. If you abandon a garden, weeds begin to grow, flowers wither, and everything loses life. But if you care for it again, if you water it, remove what doesn't belong, and plant new seeds, that garden can bloom again. No matter how many winters have passed. That image touched her deeply. For the first time she understood that her brain was not rigid or doomed to decline. It was alive, dynamic, capable of change and growth. I explained that every time we learn something new, every time we use our mind in a different way, we create or strengthen pathways inside the brain. They are like trails connecting neurons. When we stop using those trails, they gradually weaken, as if they were being covered by weeds. That is when forgetfulness, confusion, and mental fog begin to appear. But the good news, and this is something I always emphasize to my patients, is that those pathways can be strengthened again. They can even become true neural highways. You do not need complicated devices. You do not need expensive treatments. What your brain truly needs is the right kind of stimulation, an exercise that forces it to work in a new, coordinated, and conscious way. And that is when I told Elena about the 60-second exercise. I explained that its power was not in difficulty, but in the precise combination of 3 elements: movement, breathing, and attention. When those 3 elements come together, something very interesting happens inside the brain. It is as if you open windows and allow more oxygen to enter, as if areas that had been working at half speed begin to wake up again, and little by little new connections begin to form. I told her that if she practiced it every day, that small minute would become something like tending her own mental garden, a simple act that over time could bring meaningful changes. When Elena left my office that day, she carried something she had not felt in a long time: hope. But it was not empty hope. It was hope built on understanding how her brain worked and having a clear plan to start helping it. For the first time she stopped feeling like a victim of her memory. She felt she could begin taking care of it. And now I want you to try this exercise with me. You do not need anything special. Just a chair and 1 minute of your attention. Remember something I always tell my patients: this is not about strength or speed. What matters is calm, concentration, and precision. We will divide this minute into 2 parts of 30 seconds each. First, let's prepare. Sit at the edge of a chair. Keep your back straight but relaxed. Let your shoulders drop naturally. Place your feet firmly on the floor, about hip-width apart. Now rest your hands on your thighs with your palms facing down. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath through your nose, then slowly release the air through your mouth. Do it gently, allowing any tension to fade away. Very good. Now open your eyes. We are ready. First part of the exercise: activation and coordination. The first 30 seconds. The goal here is to stimulate communication between the two hemispheres of the brain and synchronize movement with breathing to improve oxygen flow to the brain. We will start with a very simple movement. Slowly raise your right arm forward until it is roughly parallel to the floor. Do it gently. No sudden movements. As your arm rises, inhale deeply through your nose. Count mentally to 4 as you lift your arm. Now slowly lower your right arm until your hand rests again on your thigh. As you lower it, exhale through your mouth while counting to 4 again. Once your right hand touches your thigh, we move to the left arm. Raise your left arm slowly just as you did before. As it rises, inhale through your nose while counting to 4. Then lower it slowly while exhaling through your mouth, again counting to 4. That completes one cycle. Now continue repeating the pattern. Raise the right arm as you inhale. Lower the right arm as you exhale. Raise the left arm as you inhale. Lower the left arm as you exhale. Keep a calm, steady rhythm for those 30 seconds. Focus only on the movement and the breathing. Now we move to the second part of the exercise, the mental challenge. From second 30 to the end of the minute. Do not stop the arm movement. Continue exactly as before. But now we will add a small challenge for your brain. While you keep raising and lowering your arms with your breathing, begin saying out loud words that belong to the same category. For example, you might choose animals. As you move, you could say, lion, elephant, giraffe, horse, tiger. Do not worry if you go blank for a moment. Just breathe calmly and say the next animal that comes to your mind. In fact, that small effort of searching for the word while maintaining the movement is exactly what helps create new connections inside the brain. Continue naming words from the same category until the minute is complete. And that is it. 1 minute that can help change your relationship with your memory. Now I want to mention 3 very common mistakes you should avoid if you truly want this exercise to work. The first is rushing through it. When you hurry, your body becomes tense. And stress is not a friend of the brain. Quite the opposite. The goal of this exercise is to create calm, control, and focus. The second mistake is doing it with distractions. This minute should be dedicated entirely to your mind. No television, no conversations, no checking your phone. Just you and your brain working together. The third mistake, and perhaps the most important, is lack of consistency. The brain learns through repetition. When you repeat an action every day, neural connections begin to strengthen. That is why this exercise does not work if you do it only once. It works when it becomes a small daily habit. A minute that, repeated day after day, begins to awaken new pathways inside your mind. In my experience, I have seen how something so simple can make a real difference for many people who believed their memory could no longer improve. If lately you feel that your memory is not responding the way it used to, that some words take too long to appear, or that memories feel blurred, remember something very important. Your brain can still grow stronger. And the 1-minute exercise you just learned can become a powerful tool if you integrate it into your daily routine. One helpful tip I often give my patients is to anchor the habit to something they already do every day. For example, you could practice it right after brushing your teeth in the morning or just before going to bed. That way your brain starts associating one action with the other, making the habit much easier to maintain. Many patients ask me a very logical question. Dr. Gabriel Mena, how can something so simple really affect memory? My answer is always the same. The explanation lies in a concept we now understand very well in neuroscience: neuroplasticity. Today we know the brain is not a rigid or static structure. It is a dynamic organ capable of reorganizing itself, creating new connections and strengthening existing ones throughout life. Even in later years, the brain can adapt and improve its function when it receives the right stimulation. This exercise works precisely because it activates 3 mechanisms that stimulate neuroplasticity. The first is what we call dual tasking. In other words, forcing the brain to perform 2 activities at the same time. In this case, a physical movement, your arms, and a cognitive task, searching for words in a category. When you do both simultaneously, your brain leaves autopilot mode and different regions begin working together more efficiently. Several key brain areas are involved. For example, the frontal lobe, which you could think of as the conductor of an orchestra. It manages attention, planning, and decision-making, and becomes active as you search for words and maintain concentration. The cerebellum is also involved. It coordinates movement and helps synchronize the slow, controlled motion of your arms. And of course the temporal lobe, which contains the hippocampus, a structure essential for memory. Searching for words within a category directly stimulates the circuits responsible for recall and language. The second mechanism is conscious breathing. Slow, deep breathing increases the flow of oxygen-rich blood to the brain, and a well-oxygenated brain functions more clearly. At the same time, this type of breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's system of calm and repair. This helps lower cortisol levels, the stress hormone. And chronic stress is one of memory's greatest enemies. The third mechanism, perhaps the most important of all, is consistency. The first day you do this exercise is like opening a small path through dense vegetation inside the brain. But if you never walk that path again, it quickly disappears. When you repeat the exercise every day, that path gradually widens until it becomes a neural highway, a strong, fast, and efficient connection. Constant repetition sends a clear message to the brain. This connection matters. Strengthen it. That is why I always tell my patients this is not magic or a quick trick. It is something far more powerful, physiotherapy for the brain. A training method that uses the brain's own mechanisms to strengthen itself from within. I remember when Elena returned to my office after her first week practicing the exercise. She laughed and admitted something to me. "Doctor, the first day was a complete mess. I mixed up my arms, I couldn't think of animals, everything felt scrambled." But she also remembered something I had told her: stay calm, do not judge yourself, and try again the next day. And that is exactly what she did. The next day she practiced again. And the next. The improvement did not arrive like a sudden flash of light. It was more like a sunrise, slow, gradual, but unstoppable. About 2 weeks later, she told me something that deeply moved her. She had been talking on the phone with her daughter about a car problem. Suddenly she said without hesitation, "Did you check the alternator? Something similar happened to your father." She stopped mid-sentence, surprised. Not only had she remembered a technical word that once would have escaped her, she had connected it to a complex memory. Her daughter said something that stayed with Elena forever. You sounded like yourself again." From that point on, small victories began to appear. She started remembering the names of characters in the shows she watched. She returned to the supermarket without needing a list for everything. She felt more present, more confident, more connected to what was happening around her. And most importantly, she regained her confidence. She went back to her reading club and began calling her friends again, this time without the constant fear of going blank. But Elena is not the only story I remember. I also think of Ramon, a 78-year-old retired carpenter who came to my office not only because of forgetfulness, but because he had begun to feel insecure when walking. He was afraid of losing his balance and falling. I showed him a variation of the same exercise. 15 days later, he returned with a smile that said everything. "Dr. Gabriel Mena," he told me, "I feel more stable when I walk, but the strangest thing is that my mind feels clearer too, like someone switched on a light inside my head." Ramon's story reminds us of something very important. The brain and the body do not function separately. They are deeply connected. When we stimulate one, we often help the other as well. Throughout my career, I have seen many similar stories. People who, through simple cognitive stimulation routines, stabilize their symptoms or recover a quality of life they believed was lost. But one of Elena's most emotional moments happened 3 months later. She was organizing an old family photo album and once again found the photograph from her wedding, the same image that months earlier had left her with that silent emptiness. She told me she closed her eyes, and suddenly she heard it clearly. Her father's laughter. And then she remembered the joke he had told during the toast. She found herself alone in her living room laughing, tears running down her face. Tears of reunion with a memory she thought had been lost. Afterwards she told me something I will never forget. My garden is blooming again." Elena's story leaves us with a powerful lesson. Never underestimate the power of small actions repeated every day. That minute she dedicated to her brain each morning was not just an exercise. It was a decision, a way of telling herself, my mind matters, my health matters, and I refuse to give up. Today I wanted to share her story and the same tool I gave her. That 60-second exercise that can help wake up your brain. Remember 3 key ideas: consistency, calm, and confidence in the incredible ability your mind has to strengthen itself. Now the decision is yours. You can close this video believing that forgetfulness is simply an unavoidable part of life, or you can do something incredibly simple. Stand up, find a chair, and give yourself your first minute. Here is my challenge for you. When this video ends, set a timer for 60 seconds and do your first round of the exercise. Feel the coordination of the movement. Feel your breathing. Notice how your mind begins searching for words and working in a different way. Then come back here and leave a comment. Tell me how you felt, which category you chose, what memories you would like to strengthen. Reading your stories and building a supportive community is incredibly valuable on this journey. If this message has helped you and you want to keep learning how to strengthen your mind, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and share this video with someone who may need it. Sometimes a single video can make a real difference in someone's life. Here on Dr. Gabriel Mena's channel, we publish new videos every day with simple tips to protect memory, support brain health, and improve overall well-being. And before we say goodbye, I want to invite you to do something very meaningful. Take a moment to thank God for life, for the time we have, and for the opportunity to learn things that help us care for our body and mind. Gratitude is also a powerful form of healing. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It means a lot to share this space with you, a space dedicated to improving habits and protecting health. Tomorrow there will be a new video here on Dr. Gabriel Mena's channel with more practical ideas to help you keep your mind active and your life healthy. I will see you there. Your well-being truly matters. And remember something important: your brain still has so much potential left to bloom.